Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So thank you everybody for joining this session on building community-based civic projects into degree pathways. My name is Charles Ansell. I'm the Vice President of Research Policy and Advocacy at Complete College America. And Complete College America is one of the founding partners with civic learning and democracy engagement. And I do wish that, you know, something like this had existed in the past in my prior roles, both at the community college system of New Hampshire, as well as at the City College of Chicago, where I worked. Was lucky enough to work with President Potash. Because, you know, we really would have benefited from this. You know, one of the things that, you know, at CCA anyways, that has been very critical to our work is making sure, of course, you know, as our name would imply, we're Complete College America, but making sure that we are defining that value to be expansive, to be beyond just workforce, to make sure that we're encompassing the values of civic learning and democracy engagement into what we're putting forward in the field in terms of what college completion, you know, actually means in all its facets. So I'm here to just moderate this panel, and we have a pretty, I hope they don't mind me saying, a very illustrious group with, you know, tons of expertise on this topic. So, you know, really interested to go from, you know, our plenary session around, you know, civics courses and requirements and those core themes to like really digging into like more of the specifics around issue engagement, practical experience, skills, self-reflection, the types of things that really sit at that nexus of college completion and civic learning and democracy engagement, and really, you know, look at this from an inclusive way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody, but then when it's their turn to speak, I hope that Derek, Sharon, and Kate, you don't mind also, you know, introducing yourselves again, sharing a little bit more information. But our panelists include Derek Price, the principal and founder of DVP-PRAXIS, Sharon Warren Cook, Vice President of Student Affairs for the CUNY-Kingsborough Community College, and Kate McCarthy, Dean of Undergraduate Education at CSU-Chico. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Derek, who I hope you're able to, yep. And then if you just go into slideshow view, you should be good.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm going to try to get this working. I was having some challenges, sadly, earlier, and I'm now a little bit flummoxed about this whole thing. But hopefully we will get this going. I think everybody can see that now.
Yeah, thumbs up. It's looking perfect. You're good to go.
Awesome.
All right.
Derek Price, I'm coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. Thank you for the introduction. I'm actually sitting in the Lumina Foundation's offices. I had meetings here earlier today. I'm not traveling though, unlike maybe many of you. I live in Indianapolis and my company has been in business for about 18 years. And I started it after serving as the Director of Research at Lumina Foundation when they were first founded back at the turn of the century for about 3.5 years. So I'm glad to be here to share with you some findings relevant to your all's conversation about civic engagement, about civic learning, and tie back to a research study that my team did several years ago as part of a big initiative that the Lumina Foundation funded on high impact practices, of which service learning is considered one of them. And they did a 2-year project with the National Association of System Heads, a number of state university systems, a 2-year university system or college system to expand high impact practice at scale with an emphasis on quality and equity. And so we were able to do a research study as part of this evaluation work that is relevant to the conversations here at the forum and in other venues. In this particular study, we utilized the National Survey of Student Engagement. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this survey. It's a national survey. It focuses on 4-year institutions, universities throughout the country. And in this particular project, there were 3 systems, Georgia, Montana, and Wisconsin, that participated. And we were able to get agreements from their institutions and their systems to use the NSSE student level data from the survey administrations between 2014 and 2020 to examine high impact practices and relationship in student learning games. This particular subsample of NSSE had about 28,000 students in it. And we wanted to look particularly about self-reported learning gains across a number of high impact practices, but today I'll focus in on service learning for our purposes. We also had a very specific interest in examining the impact of high impact practices for Black and Hispanic students and adult students who were 25 and older. The sample was primarily women. About 2/3 of the sample identified as female. It is about 2/3 identified as white, and about 1/3 identified as what we might call students of color. You can see on the screen the various distribution by particular types of identification from a race and ethnic lens. The average age of the sample was 23. About 20% were older than 25, about 80% were under 25. That seems to be in part reflective of that this is a university sample, and it is a sample of freshmen and sophomores, about half and half. But it appears that most of them were 24 and younger, which is, if you're on a 4 to 6 year path to a 4-year degree, that makes some sense. Students did identify as first generation, almost half identified as first generation students, and about 1/3 identified as transfer student into the university setting. Now, one of the things we did here is work from NSSE data. So as you might know, the students National Survey of Student Engagement asked student respondents about 6 high impact practices. These are practices that can occur inside or outside the classroom that are expected to have significant impact on student learning and on their educational progress and outcomes. Service learning courses involving a community-based project is one of those 6 practices, and that is the one that we'll focus on today. For our study, we grouped the 6 high-impact practices into 2 sort of categories. Campus-based HIPs, which are on the screen, you can see generally happened mostly in the classroom, but they were focused on the university or the setting itself. And community-based HIPs we categorize as those sort of looking outward from the university and something beyond their sort of campus-based or their curricular experience. This slide tells you just focusing on the community-based high-impact practices and the participation rates among the survey sample. And you can see that roughly 2/3 of participants in these 15 institutions in these 3 states reported participating in at least one community-based high-impact practice. And this was driven by high participation in service learning, which you can see at the top of your screen. There is also significant participation in internships and much smaller participation in study abroad, which were the 3 high-impact practices we categorized as community-based. The 4 shades, and this is Lumina Foundation's formatting from the report that they did, from top to bottom deal with the adult students 25 and older. The next bar down are Hispanic students, the 3rd bar are Black students, and the bottom bar are all students in the sample. But generally speaking, you can see that regardless of which cut of the student group we're looking at here, well over 50% or over half of the students these institutions indicated they participated in at least one service learning project. There are some differences, slight differences here that you can see between Black and Hispanic students, for example, but at least in the service learning, this is fairly comparable for all students. So it's a fairly inclusive practice, at least among those who are participating in that particular high impact practice. Now, NSSE also has a number of ways for students to report their learning gains. They ask them to assess the extent to which their college experiences contributed to their knowledge, skills, personal development in a variety of domains, including those that we think might be considered more academic in nature, as well as those that might be considered more practical or personal social development in nature. But in total, the survey asked respondents to answer 10 questions related to these perceived gains in their own learning. And we use these questions to create 3 outcome measures for the analysis: overall learning gains, which cuts across all of these domains; academic learning gains, which are identified here at the top; and practical learning gains, which are the 6 domains at the bottom. Now we used a factor out for the technical people on the call. We used some factor analysis techniques to see if these loaded, and these loaded in the way that we're describing them on the screen. So it has most sort of an intuitive similarity together, but it also loaded statistically through some factor analysis respectively in these domains. Now, the important thing I think here is that service learning matters to folks. This is the data, of course, from across all of these 6 high impact practices. But our question was, did it improve educational outcomes? And one of the outcomes we wanted to know was about self-reported learning gains. We did our analysis using some basic regression OLS models that controlled for various student level characteristics. We also controlled for institution year fixed effects. If you're curious about those types of things, there are a number of other variables we included in our models, including various demographics, race and ethnicity, gender, age, whether they were a freshman or a sophomore, if they reported first generation or student status. Basically, the demographic information I provided to you on an earlier slide were used in the regression models to see if we could get some sort of a statistical relationship between participation in very specific high impact practices in both overall practical and academic learning gains. Now, the data that you see on the chart, the sort of 0.36, I apologize if it's too small. I hope you can see this fairly clearly. But these measures are mean-centered and standardized, which basically means they range from a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. And so you want to see a higher coefficient to determine that it's a positive impact or an effect size towards saying that, yes, indeed, this affected our learning gains in a particular area. And as a general rule of thumb, although it's not a consensus position, if you get a number here that's greater than 0.20 or 0.2 of a standard deviation unit, that's supposed to be considered policy relevant. So the important thing here for our purposes is if you accept that among all the technical statisticians out there that do this kind of work, it shows that service learning in particular exceeds that threshold. So there's something here within the service learning measure of learning gains that seems to have some statistical significance beyond the other forms of significance, our knowledge, our expertise and experience about this type of practice that are important to us. Not only do they meet that threshold, you can see that the service learning impact scores are significantly higher than any other of the high impact practices that we measure. We also, as I said before, wanted to look beyond just the whole student sample and look specifically at racially minoritized students, Hispanic students, and adult students 25 and older. And here we found that, in fact, they also have very significant gains in student learning. And in fact, in some cases, their gains are larger than the overall sample, particularly among the adult student population. The key thing here, I think, is, often when we want to look at disaggregated data, we're anticipating differences in the outcomes and the impacts for various student groups. And I think the big takeaway here is, yeah, there are differences for sure, but on a practical matter, service learning participation in high impact practices in general positively benefit all students, even when we break it down into specific student groups based on race and ethnicity or age, for example. I should also tell you that in this particular slide, you can see the academic and practical learning gains broken out, as well as overall learning gains. And the Black and Hispanic student groups in particular who participate in community-based HIPs, their benefits here are largely driven by their participation in service learning. As a final sort of takeaway for all of you before you get to hear from folks that are really doing the work on the ground at both Kingsborough Community College and Cal State University-Chico, we found in this particular study that participation in service learning is strongly associated with positive academic and practical learning gains for all students, and specifically for Black students, Hispanic students, and students aged 25 and older. This analysis reinforces prior research in the field, if you follow this type of research, about the educational benefits of high impact practices, but it also extends the evidence base to eliminate variation in relationships across both types of high impact practices, like service learning in particular, as well as the nature of the learning gains that are associated with that participation, practical learning gains versus academic learning gains. Clearly, community-based HIPs, defined as those that explicitly extend to communities beyond the campus, correlate strongly with overall academic and practical learning gains, and the practical learning gains are particularly large for students experiencing these types of high-impact practices. The learning gains associated with community-based high-impact practices are large and significant for all students, as well as for Black students, Hispanic students, and students 25 years and older. Service learning is the most common high-impact practice experience, so there's a large base and universe of colleges and universities already doing these kinds of things. So there's an opportunity to expand and lean into civic engagement and democratic engagement through this work. I hope that this particular evidence further entices you to continue to pursue this road. I will put this link in the chat when I go off share screen here, but this report is available on our website. It's also available on Lumina Foundation's website, but I'm not sure the exact location, or I would have that for you as well. But I do appreciate the time to share with you these positive impacts of service learning on practical and academic learning gains for students based on this study from the Lumina Foundation in 15 institutions across Georgia, Montana, and Wisconsin as a foundation for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I think that that really sets up our next presenter quite well, because, you know, as we go into, you know, the evidence base behind these practices and what students are able to do with it and how it's able to impact their ultimate success, Kate and then Sharon are now going to go into, you know, some specific studies on how they've been able to do this at their colleges in a really, I think what makes it distinct is a really inclusive manner. So Kate, do you mind taking it from here?
Could unmute myself, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful setup for what we're trying to do at Chico State. Let me figure out if I can get my slides shared here. Okay, are you seeing my slides?
Yeah, but do the thing you did last time. That
I'm still in presenter mode. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. How's that?
There you go. Perfect.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Kate McCarthy. I get to serve as the Dean of Undergraduate Education at California State University-Chico. That role means different things on different campuses. For Chico State, it means I'm responsible for a lot of student success initiatives, but I also have a number of programs in my unit that that really aim to advance high impact practices around campus. So I have the first year experience program, the honors program, the Office of Civic Engagement, the Chico Student Success Center, and a number of others. So I've been in this position for about 5 years, but before that, I was faculty and chair for many, many years in the Department of Comparative Religion and Humanities. And my research background is in interreligious relations. So I, like many people in our recent political past, have gotten very interested in the issue of political polarization and depolarization. And my background in interreligious dialogue really sort of morphed into a fascination with what it takes to get people who are very different from one another engaged meaningfully with each other. So I come at this from a number of different perspectives, but it's deeply meaningful work to me personally. Let me say a little bit about Chico State. We are one of 23 campuses in the CSU system. You can see us up there pretty far north. Humboldt is the only one farther north. We have an enormous, our service regions are defined for each campus. Ours is enormous. It encompasses 12 counties. It's very rural. I think we say it's about the size of the state of Ohio. We are a Hispanic serving institution at about 37%, and we have for several years now been a majority first-gen student population. So our region is very important to us. We're one of the few residential campuses in the system. A lot of those Southern California campuses are mostly commuter oriented, but we are residential, rural. We're in a very low income region, and all of that sort of place-based identity informs what we try to do with civic engagement. So the primary place that we're doing this civic learning is in first-year experience courses. We don't have a system-wide requirement for civic learning, so we have to try every tool in our kit to help as many students as possible have these experiences. So I want to just reiterate the word in my title. We are going towards universal coverage in the sense of expansive civic learning, but we are certainly not there yet. But these first-year experience courses have been really a strategic way for us to help more students have access to these community engaged experiences. So the first thing to note about our FYE courses is that they are embedded in general education. So these courses meet requirements. They're a subset of general education courses that meet requirements in different areas, for instance, lifelong learning, written communication, and we have a system-wide required course in American government, which different campuses handle different ways. But we offer a single course to meet that requirement that all first-year students take. So by putting our first-year experience stamp on that American government course and making that a civically engaged opportunity, we've really had a chance to do quite a bit with it that might not be happening on other campuses. So all of these first-year experiences courses, including the American government course, are project-based, which means we use an inquiry model. A lot of the sections are flipped classroom model with very little lecture and a lot of hands-on learning. We make sure that the students understand that their work has an authentic real-world purpose. It's not reading the chapter and learning the material and taking a test. And in many of them, we embed peer mentored teams. So we draw on a lot of social learning theory. What's I think the special sauce of of these courses is what we've called public sphere pedagogy. In order to get at that authentic purpose, these courses always include community stakeholder engagement. So there are opportunities at different points in the semester for students in a team who are working on a given issue might engage community members who are relevant to that issue. And then the courses culminate in a large-scale public event. The main ones we are running now are the town hall meeting, which is associated with that American government course. We haven't done the Chico Great Debate for the past couple of years. The pandemic sort of threw that one off, but that also was associated with a number of these GE classes. And every semester we run something called the Sense of Place Symposium, which is another public opportunity for students to present their work. So these are first-year students taking on real matters of public concern, researching them, working with community stakeholders, and making public presentations on policy matters. So here's a couple images from the town hall meeting. So students are registering for the big day. So it feels sort of like, registering for a conference, but throughout the semester, they would have been working in teams. They might have had some community consults throughout the semester. Here we see the student consulting with a community member at the event, another student presenting her research. The one of these courses that I'm most excited about is a course called University 101, which historically was sort of a how to be a college student course, kind of study skills and that sort of thing. But we turned it into a first-year research course where all the students are researching what student success and equity mean on our campus. So we introduce them to our own campus data on student success. They're working with our institutional research dashboards. They're researching what is sense of belonging and how does it relate? What are high impact practices and these sorts of things. And they they go around campus researching the different support programs that are doing this work, and then they make a public presentation at the Sense of Place Symposium back to the campus units that they have been researching. So it's a win-win-win, because the students are learning how to navigate their campus, they're experiencing themselves as authentic researchers, and the campus is benefiting from what they have had, what they can teach us based on what they have learned in their research. The outcomes for these courses are many, and we do a survey every year, a big end of course survey of the students' experience that aligns fairly closely with some of those NESI questions. And that's where we get this demonstration of civic efficacy. The students report both gains in academic and civic efficacy, as it's articulated in that survey. But if we just look simply at the numbers that I am required to look at, retention and graduation rates, we see that students who participate in these first-year experience courses do better in year 1 to year 2 retention than the university average. That's also true for our underrepresented minority populations, although the gap still exists. And the 4-year graduation rate is somewhat better for students who have had this experience than the university average. So those are all really compelling outcomes for us. But of course, you know, we're also interested in those, in that deeper learning and deeper identity development that we think students are having in these courses as well. Beyond those curricular experiences, we have a very active, though tiny, Office of Civic Engagement, whose mission is really to build these regional partnerships for mutual benefit. So I come back to that sense of our very large, very rural, not very college-going region. So building these partnerships is beneficial for both the institution and for the North State itself, what we call our region. So several of these programs have developed recently. Town Hall 2.0 was a version of that town hall course that I was just describing that was offered in a continuation high school in rural Northern California to give high school students that same kind of experience, mentored by some of the students who had been through the town hall course on our campus. North State Roots is a student, faculty, staff collaborative organization, building the connections among the people who come from this place across campus, and connecting with their home communities and regional partners. Giving Back Home is what's illustrated in that photograph. This is a new program that our Civic Engagement Director has launched in the past couple years, where students from the North State who are currently enrolled with us develop a service project in their home community. So this was a mural painting project in the community of Corning that this Chico State student was involved in. And in the process, they're strengthening their relationship with that institution in their home community. And we hope building, growing the college-going culture there. And finally, the North State Ambassadors Program, brand new one, just getting launched. In this case, we're paying student researchers from the North State to do asset mapping in their home communities, again, to continue to build those alliances and partnerships. We track our work through this new software that we've been using for 3 or 4 years now, called Collaboratory. We're one of many campuses using this. But we've just entered into, I think, a 5-year contract with it. This has been a great way for us to be able to track our work and tell our story, because all of these activities, whether it's in an individual course, a first-year experience course, or any course on campus that a faculty member is running, can be all these activities can be uploaded in here. It might just be a one-off service project. It might be an internship. It might be a whole ongoing institutional program like the town hall meeting. But this has really been helpful for us to showcase and tell a data story around what we're doing. I want to, I haven't really been tracking my time. Am I doing okay? I think I'm okay. I've got one more slide here. Am I okay, Charles?
No, yeah, you're fine.
Okay. So strategies to get to this universal coverage in terms of civic learning. Obviously, we've taken this general education strategy, but we're also looking at other university degree requirements, like that American government course is technically a degree requirement, not part of general education. We happen to double count it here, but that doesn't work that way on every campus. We have a huge internship program through our associated students. They do, it's called community, the acronym is CAVE. I forget what all the letters are. Community Action Volunteers in Education. Thousands of students coming through that, again, doing one-off service projects or sustained internships. Some of those are required by their degree programs, so that's another way we can expand the reach. And then I've got this other that I hope we'll get to talk about. What are other mechanisms that folks are using? We're thinking a lot about the institutional programs and priorities and crises and challenges that might be helpful. So we're having a real problem with enrollment right now. We need to stem a declining enrollment problem, especially trying to build enrollment in our region. That's part of our strategic plan. And so we're, as some of those examples that I just briefly described, they're really trying to build these partnerships in the region that will help grow our enrollment. So if I can tell the story of a civic engagement experience as one prong on approaching an enrollment challenge, I think that's something very helpful. We're also trying to grow our undergraduate research experience. So that's another initiative that we're actually trying to sort of merge our high impact practices. We think that civic learning is most powerful when it's understood as a research experience for students. So and trying to grow the campus as a civic research site. So again, those students doing research on first year success and belonging and equity on their own campus, we really frame as serious real world research that they're doing for the benefit of others. So I think I will pause there and hope to have a lot more conversation when we get to that point.
Excellent. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Sharon Warren Cook. I think it's a great contrast to go from West Coast and rural to very East Coast and urban to get a compliment on putting a lot of what Derek shared to life. So enough out of me. Sharon?
Okay, thank you so much, Charles. Good afternoon to everyone. Let me say a special hello to Professor Jason Leggett, who's on the call, who's not only been a scholar in the area, but works tirelessly on our campus to support it. So I'm going to speed through my slides because I think we were supposed to have had about 20 minutes of discussion. So I'll try to talk quickly. I joined Kingsborough Community College in 2017, and I spent 27 years in the state of North Carolina between two large public institutions that were very involved in civic engagement, service learning. And so I came into Kingsborough thinking this is probably going to be a replica of that. And it was not. It was absolutely something totally different from that. So let's just take a look. One of the first things just to know about Kingsborough is that we've been recognized as a leading college by the Aspen Institute in their College of Excellence program. This is our third time. We are again a finalist this year. We're in the top 10. And then there are a couple of demographics there about who we enroll and what our student population is like. Again, we are in Brooklyn, New York, so you probably can guess what our population is like. We're a two-year institution and we're non-residential. And I say that because having come into Kingsborough after close to 28 years on residential campuses, my life was very different with service learning and engagement because students lived there. There were things we could do in the evenings and on the weekends and over the breaks. And that's not the case here. We are really a suitcase campus. So we are really selling a product to our students and helping them to understand how this fits into their development as they continue to matriculate. I've got some stats here, about 55% women, 37% Black, 25% white, 18% Hispanic, 16% Asian Pacific Islander. We've got about 50 clubs and organizations. We've got many of our students who come in majoring in liberal arts, but we are also a career technical education institution where Perkins gives us a couple of $1 million a year to support our CTE programs, and we offer about 50 of those. We confer about 2,000 degrees annually, and about 70% of our graduates go on. At Kingsborough, just to give you a little bit of the context, prior to my arrival in early 2012 and actually 2013, it was decided that civic engagement, which is under this whole umbrella of what we're talking about with service learning, would become a requirement. And so people like Jason, who are on the call, and other staff here and faculty who are committed to the research and working with students decided to say, hey, what can we do to move this forward? So one of the first things we did once I got here was to join those groups and those organizations. And what we started to do was to look at, what do we want to do with this? So just kind of the history and context of this. For Kingsborough Community College, we've got 3 options to get your credit. This is a graduation requirement for us. So there's a certified civic engagement course. There's a component CE course that might be kind of a hybrid model. And then there's a non-course related experience where the student may be going through career services, may be working for an academic or a non-academic learning experience, meaning that there's some that they're getting course and academic requirement for, and others that they are not. When we look at where our students are and what they're doing, again, I think I can certainly send the slides out, but I won't stop at 511 to talk about this. This is just a slide that talks about our degree, non-degree, part-time, full-time students, demographics and ethnicity. I've kind of quickly reviewed that for you. One of the things that was paramount and important for us was to find an institutional definition for us about what this type of work was going to be. And so we came up with our definition that we accept this fundamental principle that education requires this social awareness, this social responsibility, this active participation. And so this is what we believe both in and outside of the classroom. So these things are really co-curricularly embedded across the academic affairs and the student affairs silos that we see in many places. Also, there is an explicit connection to the college's mission and our institutional learning outcomes. And so as we met in faculty groups and had town halls 6 or 7 years ago, these things were discussed. These things about civic engagement, global awareness, civility, respect for diversity. And so we linked those back to things that that our faculty and staff understood, that when we talk to students, we can say, this is a part of our mission. These are not only institutional learning outcomes, they're program learning outcomes, and most of you will see them in your class. Again, this became an official graduation requirement for our students. In 2019, it's in our course cal log. It is logged into the learning management system that our students have. So they come in knowing this. We talk about this in orientation, in our engagement activities, in welcome week. So this notion of how important it is embedded in every contact that we make with students. We adopted the AAC&U Civic Engagement Reflective Assignment Assessment rubric. And this is what we've been using since that time. We devised and played around with our questions and then decided what it meant for a student to end up being in a limited, acceptable, or proficient category. And so our students actually write an essay to talk about their growth or the impact that their time in this engagement or learning activity has had on them. And then we're not grading this to do a pass or fail. We're trying to look at this in our classes to see exactly where students have opportunities for growth, where we can challenge them, and how to continually increase equity in what we do here at Kingsborough. So the areas that we had, again, were political knowledge, civic knowledge, social responsibility. Some of the recommendations, sometimes I'm asked, what would you suggest or how would you think about talking to this to a group of people who were just kind of at the beginning or thinking about this in some way? Some of the things that we talk through, again, would be that definition so that everyone on campus has a unified, systematic, operational definition of what we're talking about. We made this a graduation requirement by having certified courses and a process for approval. We also have approved co-curricular activities. And so those might be activities that students engage in around advocacy, around voting, around equity in childcare, around food insecurity, around homelessness. It could be any of those things that we have that are approved. Come up with a common and appropriate assessment tool. And then this notion of having a communication plan so that your entire campus knows what you're doing is really important. So we have communication evaluation, and then this kind of almost continuous quality improvement as we think about it. And then certainly many schools have decided to get an active advisory board. And these are community as well as our campus stakeholders to talk through this process. So I think I did that in about 5 minutes so that we can have enough time to discuss, because I'd much rather engage with you in your questions and hear from other people. And again, I've got my colleague Jason Leggett on the call if he wants to make a comment or if he wants to share something. But thank you so much for having Kingsborough Community College here today.
Excellent. Well, so why don't we open it for questions? I'll just get things started though. Sharon, on your last slide, you mentioned the active advisory board. Who's typically on that? Or it could be for you, or I'm just thinking.
Right, you would want your community stakeholders and partners on that you're working with. You would want people on campus, maybe from career services, somebody on the academic side. You want someone in the community who's been working as a campus partner. So we've got a number of campus partners here. And they might be supporting us through our high school partnerships. It might be transfer. It might be work that we're doing. We pull those people in and they talk to us about what the opportunities are for students. That doesn't mean that we don't go to them, but we wanted this community buy-in. And so we do that on our CTE council. We do it on our Carl Perkins Grant Council. And these are, again, our CTE, our career technical education things to get students linked in. So we want to hear. So we've got Google on the board. We've got Spotify on the board. We've got community, ecologically and sustainably friendly organizations on the board. We've got kind of the gambit: childcare, geriatric care, equestrian care. We've got kind of the gambit that can speak to students and hopefully provide some opportunities for them, because many of our students coming directly out of high school to a community college have no idea what we're talking about, and they don't know what their options are. And so when you go back to kind of that equity piece, there's a little bit of education that has to occur in that, so that our students know what their options are and how supported they are going to be by campus to be successful in doing that, as we're not only wanting to get a graduation requirement, I want students to develop. So this is really much more than just that. We've got this fundamental piece about a graduation requirement, but I hope most of us want to be able to create citizens who can go into the world and really make a contribution, and they're self-confident and they know who they are. And this has been a wonderfully life-changing experience for them.
Extremely well said.
Could you possibly talk, it was really great presentations for all three, but Sharon, talk a little bit more at Kingsborough about the relationship between the requirement and the equity work? Because I know you all were like achieving the dream for a while and you've got pretty strong equity plans. How do those two, in terms of like, I don't want to say like initiative overload, but how do they align in ways that works throughout the college?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, we say at Kingsborough that we center equity at all of the work that we do. So this is about making sure that every student has a chance to grow with this. So one of the ways we do this, David, is we think of the students who come to us, and plenty of them come to us and they say, I have families, I'm working a job, I go to school. And for people who don't know, we've got students who travel into Brooklyn about 2 hours, sometimes one way. So if they're using 4 hours of their day to travel and they have a job and they have a family, this becomes extremely difficult. So part of the creativity that many of our scholars and researchers on campus have looked to figure out is, what can we do so that this is meaningful for everyone? What we don't want is for people who are strapped and economically disadvantaged and don't have just the kind of 6 or 8 hours a week to do this, to be kind of relegated to saying, these are the only activities that I can participate in. And so a lot of effort goes in working with each and every student and through our career services department, where we have service learning workers there that are funded through the Perkins grant that is through Student Affairs, to make sure that we link students to activities that are supportive of what they might have an interest in, and to be as creative as possible so that the timing or your economic situation doesn't end up determining what this experience is for you. And so that's where the mesh is. That's where we have this Venn diagram and they're overlapping. So we do the best we can with that and try to give students the best experience possible, given their work day and the timing and what's realistic for them, to ensure that they can still be retained and get out of here.
I'd be kind of curious to hear, your take, Kate, on the same question. And also just thinking about the requirement. Actually, one clarifying point, and this might be just for me, in which case I apologize. You mentioned 54% coverage in terms of the requirement. I couldn't tell, was that 54% with the new high impact practices embedded in the course, or was it 54% coverage for the course overall?
All the courses collectively that have that public
Got
sphere pedagogy experience.
I see.
Yeah, across all our programs. Yeah. So sorry, what's the question that you're asking?
So, yeah, I mean, it's basically, similar to, what President Potash, mentioned in terms of the links between equity and the requirement for the course, and whether those connections end up being something, greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, I think the connection is really explicit for us. Civic work is equity work. And so one way that's visible is in that course that I was talking about, that University 101 course, where students their assignment is to research equity in higher education, right? And why are there equity gaps? And what does the equity gap look like on the Chico State campus? And what are the practices that seem to be effective in reducing that? So we always center purpose in our students' work, trying to make sure they get that this is not school for school's sake. And the purpose in our programs is the purpose itself centers equity, I think is the best way I could say it. Yeah.
Other questions from attendees? Or I suppose to each other.
I have one for Derek. Can you just remind me on the NESI, the students reporting their experiences, how do they know what service learning means? Are they prompted with, have you done this, or that, or are they just given the word service learning? How do we know that what we think service learning matches what they are reporting having experienced?
You won't be satisfied with my answer, Kate, but that's my own fault. I'm not a NESI expert, so I don't know their items specifically, but the service learning question that's used in there has a definitional component, a different type of question than on the other items of high impact practices. And I won't get this exactly right because I don't have that right in front of me. It is footnoted in our report, tells you exactly what that item is. But in essence, it's something along the lines of, did you participate in a service learning activity? And then it gives a definition of what that might mean, because I don't know if students would really know if you said, did you have service learning? I'm not sure they would really know what that means. And so it does on the item give them a specific definition. We mean this. And if there's somebody else on the call,
beautiful.
They might know that question on the call, but I don't know the specific item from my notes. I know it's footnoted in the report, though. I'm sorry.
And thanks. And that's what I thought I recalled. Yeah.
I've got a question to start things off, if that's okay. David Scobie, I direct Bringing Theory to Practice, and I want to congratulate everyone on the presentations. We've been longtime fans of the Chico first year experience, and I love Kingsborough too. So this question is with total admiration, but you both describe sort of single experiences for students, and they are fabulous experiences. I really appreciate how well designed they are. And those always run the risk of being kind of standalone, disaggregated experiences. I wonder if you could just fantasize what would be sort of the next horizon of work you'd want to do to have what you've created be more holistic and integrated across the student experience, completely setting aside resource limitations, institutional politics. Just what's the next thing that your good work wants to have happen?
But David, I'll take a stab at that. I'm so glad you asked that, because if I describe that, I probably left out a critical component. I was trying to speed up so we could get to the questions. So we currently have over 300 courses that we've approved for civic engagement. So one of our concerns, and it was one of my concerns at the time, I was a dean in academic affairs at this time in 2018, was our students were reporting registering for multiple courses that had multiple civic engagement activities. And so they were saying in their minds, why am I doing this 5 or 6 times? So it has not been a singular experience for us. So even if we don't have to count that course, the students are still in those courses because we don't parcel them out. What my office ensured back in 2018, 2019 was that any student in any major had an opportunity in multiple courses. If that student transferred into us with credits, they didn't miss it as a gen ed course coming in, that they could pick it up wherever they were. But they've had multiple experiences of it, but we only needed to count it that one time as our current graduation requirement. So we've seen that they'll have an opportunity in an education course, in a psych class that they take, in a social class, in a poli-sci class that they take. So they've had multiple opportunities in that way. And I guess if I had just limitless money, it would be the first of all, make sure that every student understood this, even in our application process, and it permeates outside of the walls of Kingsborough, that this is what we're introducing you to. We do that in orientation, in our new student orientation, in our engagement activities, and during Welcome Week. And then I would like to give students a cadre of kind of community-based projects with a center for service learning or civic engagement that was staffed. We do not have a center or an office that is staffed. So we manage all of this and the degree requirements ourselves. So I would love to have a center where that is centrally placed on campus, and where this equity work that we are doing that's so critically important to the mission of who we are at Kingsborough has that, and that students would have it in a more prominent form. And those would be kind of my dreams. I'll leave some time for Kate to talk about that, but that's it. But just know, David, they do get a chance to experience this on multiple occasions.
I'll take an office and a staff too. My Office of Civic Engagement is a half-time faculty buyout in one little room, doing incredible work out of that, small set of resources. Yeah, I can echo much of what Sharon said, that these are one-offs, but there's a lot of them, right? So a student is having a lot of these experiences. We have these courses that are tagged service learning, but they're not attached to a requirement. So we're not sure why anybody has applied to have their courses tagged as service learning when the students can find them that way. But my dream, coming from the academic side, my dream is curricular. I really want civic experience, community engaged experience linked to research experience that is threaded throughout the curriculum, and specifically through general education, which makes it most equitable. It's not just the STEM students getting it, right? Research is for everybody. And if we thread it through from this, another thing I should have said when on the equity question, we pre-enroll certain populations into that equity in higher ed University 101 course. So students in our support programs are disproportionately represented there. So they're getting that experience. So, but I want it all the way through. I want it at, we've just created a 300 level higher ed research course, undergraduate research in higher ed that meets a GE requirement. So I want it to be in the water of the coursework that they do here, that everything is place-based, in our region or in the, in their home region. Students do research on their own home communities, but I really like the idea of merging community engagement, and we're shifting from civic to community in our language because it seems to speak more to students. Haven't done anything official yet, but we use that word more. So really merging community-based learning and research.
This was great. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I just want to look at the chat as well from this comment from Elaine. Excellent. I'm biased, but I thought that this was, all three presenters were truly phenomenal to bring such richness of evidence base to what we've been talking about to show that it really can work in two very, different colleges. And so, I certainly, thank you for your excellent presentations. And I suppose I also do that on behalf of the attendees. So somebody can interrupt if they disagree, but that would be very rude. So no, but seriously, thank you all so much. I do want to mention that this is the last session for today. We will be reconvening tomorrow at, I believe, I'm just going to pull it up really quick. Yeah, day 2 begins tomorrow at 2 Eastern. So look forward to seeing everybody there and then. And again, thank you so much. This was really wonderful.
Thank you all.